What's up guys, it's Bo here again, and welcome to another Bojanian vlog. In this vlog entry, I want to talk about a recent realization of mine, of course, that is an extension from the topics that I've been talking about in recent entries, right? So, I've been essentially talking about the kind of shift in consciousness that we are now faced with, right? Whether or not that decision to go along with, how the consciousness, how, the kind of collective consciousness, you could say, is being pulled towards, whether or not we choose to actually be a part of that is our own choice, right? It's our own lives, it's our own prerogative. But, nevertheless, this is the case, right? We are being pulled in the direction of an entirely new way of going about life, essentially, right? And so I in one of my previous entries, I talked about the concept of and consciousness, which is Teal Swan's articulation of, this very thing, the kind of shift from traditionally thinking in terms of this or that, in the sense that, this is my truth, and therefore, in order for me to attain my truth, I must move in this direction, which consequently means pushing away from this direction, right? And of course, I talked about, how human beings are, are creatures of that strive towards things, like human beings are creatures of, with ideals, They're the kind of idealistic creatures, you could say, where they, they have an ideal and it's all about striving towards the ideal, right? Or at least that has been traditionally what has been the case with the human species, for time immemorial, right? Since time immemorial, I should say. And so in this entry, I wanted to talk about something I actually mentioned in one of my recent entries, which is secondary resistance, right? Now, resistance, of course, is the kind of pushing away kind of an energy that we sometimes find ourselves immersed in towards any facet of life, right? And so, as I explained, primary resistance, I have recently kind of defined resistance as being the composite of two different types of resistance, right? The first being primary resistance, which is direct resistance towards things in life, direct fears, direct negative emotions towards things, such as I am scared of this person, I am angry at this person, I'm frustrated, I must not do this, otherwise it will have this result, that kind of a defensive kind of a feeling that you get when you're trying to achieve a goal, you're trying to diet or something, and it's like, oh shit, I can't eat this donut because it will mean that I am a failure, that kind of thing. That's direct. Well, and then secondary resistance is the next tier of resistance, which is essentially resistance against primary resistance, right? It is resistance that is piled on top of existing primary resistance, right? So in the case of, being on a diet and, thinking about the fear, the initial fear of if I eat this, I will be a failure, right? And then there will come, and then there might be an additional feeling. In fact, it tends to be the case that there's an additional feeling that goes along the tune of, I'm so useless, I'm such a failure, I'm so pathetic, right? And this resistance of your resistance, right, I have found is ultimately one of the steps that we must take in order to then move into the realm of unconsciousness. Right. And unconsciousness is the paradigm that we is the paradigm that is the closest thing essentially to oneness. This is one way of viewing it, right? This is one way of articulating it. But, unconsciousness is the closest thing to oneness. The paradigm that is the closest thing to oneness that we have ever known. I'm kind of hesitant to say that we will ever know, because who knows what lies beyond, this, step of evolution of our consciousness. Like, it could get, more and more, right? There could be more stuff like ahead that we don't know about. And there most likely will be, right? But like, unconsciousness is the kind of thinking that is essentially devoid of secondary resistance, right? And I'll explain why this is the case. I will explain why eliminating, and I don't really like that word eliminate, because it implies like force, which is, essentially the primary component of resistance, right? It's the dissolution of secondary resistance, and I'll explain why secondary resistance is, like, the dissolution of secondary resistance is so utterly important if we're to like make this transition into unconsciousness, the new way of thinking, right? So traditionally, we have always had ideals as people. We've always had dreams. Whichever word you choose, whichever symbol you choose to assign that thing, that goal, that endpoint that you're trying to reach in life, and that has been the core of, things like the hero's journey and things like that. Like the journey, the human journey, the journey of humanity on an individualistic or indeed, collective kind of a perspective. It has always been to reach, some kind of ideal, right? But that has always necessitated the pushing away from something else, right? So, the hero's journey, the human journey is all about, finding yourself, self-actualization, becoming the strongest version of yourself. I'm just using like random sound bites from different people. It has always been, a journey of growth, of like attaining some kind of ultimate destiny, right? But the thing about that, right, is that it polarizes us, and that polarization is not necessarily resourceful for us, right? So I mentioned also that the way that we look, I think I actually wrote this in the description of one of my entries. I think it was the unconsciousness entry, where we can actually see, the energy, the energetic difference, because like ultimately the core of these paradigms is energetic, right? It's how you feel, or rather your feeling is an indication of like the kind of energy that you're focused on, that you're resonating with, right? And so you can view and you can view things like and all consciousness, or oneness and duality, in a sense of either oneness or duality, right? And this is the key, right? You can view ultimately, like, so, yes, there is oneness and duality, right? There is contrast, because we live on the physical plane, and there is also oneness, which is an underlying connection that ties everything together, right? Everything into this oneness, right? You can actually then, right, view those two different observations as dualistic in the sense that they are opposite from one another and they cannot exist simultaneously. Or you could actually view these two contrasting perspectives, these two contrasting observations, as being part of a greater cycle, where they are in fact complementary and feed into each other, right? Duality feeds into oneness, which feeds into duality, which feeds into oneness, right? The breath of life, inhalation, exhalation, growth and recession, summer and winter, right? And so the polarization that has happened traditionally, is that it makes us either be really aggressive towards attaining our goals. It's like, okay, well, obviously there are two outcomes that could potentially happen. I could live my life and achieve my dreams and be really happy and fulfill myself and find myself, or I could fail at that, or even give up on that, right? And so you either become really aggressive, you kind of take on board a kind of a type A personality, you could say, or you can take on a kind of type B personality where you're just whatever, man, it's all of it is fake, and this second category belongs to, obviously, traditionally spiritual people. The traditional kind of mindset of spiritual people has always been, it's all fake anyway. At the end of the day, you achieve it, and that's not the end of it. It's never going to be the end of it. So why even try, right? And that has been a legitimate kind of a perception, a traditional kind of an axiom, you could say. Although I'm a bit iffy about that word in terms of this context, but it has been traditionally a perspective that typically spiritual people have upheld, right? And going into the future, right? So ultimately we are met with this question of, how do we live life? It comes down to how do I live life? Ultimately, and again, traditionally, traditionally, people have been polarized into these two camps where, one is the kind of obsessive drive towards doing and succeeding and fulfilling and creating and and striving towards the ideal, right? Because there's not enough time in life. Your life is limited. The time here that you have is limited. So I'm not going to waste it, right? That's one mentality. The second mentality is, well, if I'm going to die one day, if life is always going to be continuously a struggle with no end in sight, then what's the fucking point? What's the fucking point of getting so uptight and stressed out and just, neurotic, driven to the point of neurosis? What's the point? I might as well just sit here and just take it all in, right? But and that sounds like a good idea in many ways, just sitting here and letting life unfold. But whereas the first type of person is, is stressed out, it has to go through all of this pain and drama and ups and downs and failures and losses and shit like that. The second person has to live in denial, right? He would go so far with his belief about the fact that there's no point to doing anything in life, and it's just about sitting back and cleansing oneself of all desire. That person doing that means that he must deny his desire. That is the extent that he has gone to, you know. He denies his own humanity, you know. Like, he denies the fact that he is living, breathing, you know, alive with icky biological functions and icky like thought patterns and belief systems. Like, he would go so far as to deny himself that, and so he also lives, it could be said, in a state of turmoil, right? And the thing that I am trying to articulate in this video is the transcendence of these two traditionally mutually exclusive types of life philosophies, right? And I'm going to present this to you right now, right? I am not perfect in the sense, you know, like, I am just a messenger, you know. So, like, what I'm about to tell you, what I'm about to express, you know, could be argued as being, you know, dangerous, right? So, like, I give a disclaimer that, like, this is only my observation, this is only my perception, you know, my own kind of, like, my own kind of understanding that I've developed of a way, you know, of a modality, you know, with which you can then live life, right? You know, like, I'm not saying that this is the, you know, this is how I think you should live, this is how I should definitely live, right? And the beauty of it is, the thing that I'm about to reveal to you, is that, you know, it doesn't matter, right? That's the beauty of it, right? And so I'm going to explain what I mean, right? And so, and consciousness, the dissolution of secondary resistance. What does this mean? This means rolling with life, rolling with the punches of life. This means moving forwards, right? And I'm kind of jumping the gun here a bit, but, like, at every, you know, juncture in life, like, you will be faced with a decision. You know, every waking minute of your life, you'll be faced with some kind of decision. And if you're the more aggressive type, you know, the type A kind of personality, you will always try to, like, go for your own, like, your own idealistic decision. If you're the kind of B personality, in a way you also kind of do that, but in a more passive way, right? But regardless, you know, we're all here, you know, and every waking minute of our lives, we have to make some kind of decision, right? Now, you live long enough, or you think about it deep enough, and you realize that with every decision, like, anything could happen. You know, you could make a good decision that was conscious. You could make a bad decision that was also conscious, right? I.e., you made a mistake. You could make subconscious decisions, and that could turn out to be good or bad. You could have, like, a decision made for you that is either good or bad, right? And so, looking from, like, a macro kind of a perspective, like, there's nothing that you can really do about that, right? And you will realize this only from, you know, just, like, going through the stress, the pain, the fear, the, you know, the whatever, the journey of, like, of trying to make sense of, like, you know, how do I live my life? Why is my life not going the way that I want it to? In spite of my growing kind of ideas about the world, you know, my maturation process, right? And depending on which side of the fence you're on, so, like, the type A kind of personality, you know, will essentially, you know, I use that term type A, type B, you know, I read it on, like, some kind of psychology website, you know, but, like, really that's not entirely accurate, you know. It's more like, it's more to do with, like, the person who, like, is more about living, you know, like, the kind of more, like, materialistic kind of a person, you could say, like the one that's more physically oriented, you know. That's really what I mean. Versus the person who's more like, you could say like spiritually inclined, right? Which is what I was calling type B, right? Where it's about, you know, everything in life is an illusion. You know, desire is ultimately an illusion. You know, I know where I came from. I came from the great oneness, the great source. I know that's what my true essence is. Of course, you know, the disclaimer, or rather, like, you know, the other side of the coin is that, like, you're a human being, motherfucker. You came here. Yes, it's all well and good, you know, like realizing that you came from source, that you were part of oneness at one point, but now you're a human being. Right? Get with the program. Anyway, I just thought I had to like kind of chime in with that. But anyway, so the kind of like more materialistic kind of person, you'd say, the one that's more physically oriented, more ambitious, more like driven in a physical sense, they will tend to resist the kind of decision, the kind of scenario where like they're not in control of their decision, they make bad decisions, right? Well, it can be said that no one really wants to make bad decisions in this context. You know, everyone wants to make the decision that's right for them. But like the materialistic person will resist things that are beyond his control. He will resist situations where like he has not the control to make a decision for himself that's aligned with his ideals, right? And so he will like push forwards for a lifestyle, like kind of a circumstance where he's in control. You know, he will like just hammer down on anything that tries to control him, right? And then obviously like the more spiritual, the more kind of like escapist kind of a personality, you know, the whole kind of like I am oneness in my true essence, right? They will resist any kind of novel opportunity, right? So like they will resist control, they will resist desire, right? They just want things to either stay stable, to stay like as they are now, or they would rather be at the mercy of life than to know that they are at fault in a way. You know, that's like what I said isn't like, it's not really conscious. You know, like I would say probably more. Well, I'm more of a mix, but like I can see how like people of the second category like would not consciously identify with that position. Like the fact that like they would prefer other people to dictate their life rather than like them taking control of their life. And no one would admit that, right? You know, for good reason, right? Like ego, you know, ego's the best reason ever. But like, yeah, so like, so, you know, they resist the fact that they have desire. They resist the fact that like they are upset with like the way that their lives are, you know, and you know they go towards spirituality and like things like oneness and whatever, you know, they choose to believe in order to kind of like escape from that, you know, essentially, right? But the thing is that life will go every which way, regardless of what you try to do, right? That does not mean don't have don't have desire, don't have like a direction that you're moving in, don't have an edge to you, right? This is the key thing, right? And this is why I think secondary resistance is the crucial thing to this, because, right, anything could happen to you. This is like really like the crux of it, right? Anything could happen to you. No matter how established you are, no matter how enlightened or like how savvy, you know, how mature you think you are, or that you really want to believe yourself to be, anything could happen to you, right? And if you're not prepared for, or rather, like, if you come with it, if you come at it with a traditional kind of like an all consciousness kind of a mentality where like it's all about being a certain way. It's all about, no, I've made a decision to be this way. You know, I may have been this way in the past, but I'm not going to be that way anymore, because like that is bullshit. You know, that means that I've failed. It means that I am a failure as a human being if I don't keep if I don't like keep like living up to the standards that I've set myself, right? But the thing is that anything could happen to you, right? You could become the most enlightened person ever, like understand everything about the nature of resistance, you know, everything about the dynamics of how, or, you know, the kind of mechanics of how like existence came into being from a single point of oneness to, you know, the kind of complex mess that we find ourselves in. You know, you can understand all of that. You can understand that like love is the answer, you know, which is one of my recent realizations. You could understand that, like, you know, you can attain your own power. You know, you can become the strongest version of yourself, right? All of these things that, you know, like other people like preach about, you know, or rather not preach, but like they espouse in their own lives. You know, the kind of one like kind of golden nugget that they have discovered in life, you know, whether that is to be strong, to be loving, to be the best, you know, whatever it may be, the ideal that they have come up with, you know, you will regress. You got to get this into your head, right? You will regress at some point. You might not, to be fair. You might not, but it could still happen. A year later, a month later, like a day later, you know, in the same day, you could regress. You could become something that you once was, that you pushed away from in order to be something that was closer to your ideal of who you were, of who you want to be, right? And you're going like traditionally, or like rather like, you're going to resist it. And I do it, you do it, everyone else will do it, right? They will resist the fuck out of it. No, I'm not that person anymore. I was that person, but I grew out of that shit. I'm older, I'm more mature, I've seen more things, you know, I've experienced more like heartbreak or pain or like whatever. That is not me anymore. And as such, you will resist that shit that you think, that you have judged as being like obsolete, old, not who you are anymore, when it comes up. And it will come up. Because why? It is said that we live in a quantum universe, right? You know, that's something that spiritual teachers say, which means that everything that has ever existed, or will exist, or is existing right now, is real, right? And it's a bit difficult for our brains to like, and you know, and this is another articulation of what I'm saying, is that like anything could happen. We live in quantum universe, anything could happen, right? And for you to stubbornly hold a position of like, this is me, this is not me, it's going to backfire to you. It's going to backfire on you. Or rather, like, it will manifest the kind of life that we have traditionally lived for, like, you know, the closest thousands of years. Whereas the new evolution that we're moving towards now is one where we start to roll with the punches as they come. Again, anything could happen. This is the thing. And most people with, you know, a kind of older, like, all consciousness kind of mentality are deathly afraid of that. They're afraid that, like, everything they've built in life is going to be destroyed. That one day they're going to die, you know? Death is the ultimate fear, right? I'm dead, what the fuck is going to happen then? I can't fathom it. Like, it... right? You know, the world is so chaotic, right? The world is so complex. The world is so... help me, who am I? What am I doing here? What the fuck? You know? You can do that. Do that all you want, right? And this is the beauty, man. This is the beauty of this. Because I'm, of course, selling with my verbal language an idea where like we evolve away from that towards a kind of paradigm where we recognize that, okay, well, if life is like, if I'm not going to be this way today, like that's okay. If I'm going to be not this way tomorrow, that's okay. If I'm then going to become this way again the day after, that's okay, right? I may be a loving person today, you know, because like I've found that the ultimate kind of thing with like the ultimate goal of life is to be as loving as I can, is to heal the world, you know, typical light worker shit. You know, like love is the most important lesson of life. You know, so I'm gonna love, right? But then one day you're gonna hate. You know, one day you're gonna fucking hate. You're gonna hate someone. You're gonna hate yourself, right? I'm going to be the strongest person ever. Like I'm gonna be the best, the absolute fucking best, right? At my craft. You do it, right? But then like you get distracted or something happens to you. Or like or like something else in your life that you weren't focused on because you were so heavily focused on perfecting your craft that it just derails you, and it causes you to have a hiatus, and then you become like less skilled. You could become weaker. That shit's gonna happen to you. Or rather, like you're going to skip a day at the gym, right? Secondary resistance is the resistance towards this change, or is rather the kind of resistance that encompasses this kind of fear, this kind of resistance. If that makes sense. In the sense that you will fear being something that you think you aren't until you learn to roll with the punches of life, to understand that life, even though like you may find something that is so compelling that you know, such as love is the ultimate lesson of life, that like becoming the strongest will you know, becoming the strongest version of myself will yield all of the bounty of life to me, or like to learn everything that I can learn about life will make me like really understand and grasp life at a level which will like make it so that like my life has ultimate meaning. Whatever the case may be, the opposite will also be true at some point, right? And so I hope I'm making this message clear. Like I feel as though like I could probably articulate it a bit better, but like secondary resistance is ultimately the resistance against change. And change is inevitable. Even the kind of change that we think would never happen to us, or rather like we don't want to think about because it's so scary, it's so infuriating. It's wrong. It's wrong to be different, you know? It's wrong to like, you know, practice authenticity and be like, oh my God, like I need to be authentic. Authenticity is the way forward, which is true. Authenticity is the, you know, one of the ways that we are learning to like approach life, you know, and each other. I'm not going to be inauthentic. I'm not going to be inauthentic, right? Or like I know that like I know that you know, like social enterprise is the way that we need to move in, you know. This example isn't coming out as well as I thought, but like yeah, and therefore like, you know, I can't use cheap marketing tactics, you know. The thing is, you can. Like, if like, even despite the fact that you think that authenticity is like fucking like like, be all end all of life, you know, I just got to be authentic. That will solve all my problems. That will solve all of the problems of society. That's the way we think, you know. And like, again, like, this is very dangerous. What I'm saying, this is very scary. It's very controversial. Is because it's like, are you saying that like any goal that you might have is essentially essentially works against you? That's what might typically be going through your head. I'm not actually saying that, or rather, that's not the essence of this new kind of paradigm. It's scary in the sense that like everything that we've known in a physical form, whether that be or like a form that is can be conceptualized of, such as, you know, like a certain practice that you have in life, a certain like principle that you have, you know, then stepping into like thoughts and beliefs. We must now let go of that. But letting go does not mean not connecting. Right. If, you know, like, you know, going back to that example, like, if you think that authenticity is the best fucking shit ever and it's going to solve everything, right? You know, recognize that, like, inauthenticity will still be there. It will still be there. Others will do it to you. You will do it to other people. Right. But, and if you want to, you can keep resisting that shit for the rest of your fucking life. Like, oh my god, I was inauthentic today. Oh my god, I can't strip that side of me that is inauthentic. I'm so fucking ashamed of myself. I'm such a failure. You can be like that for the rest of your life. Or you can just like be inauthentic sometimes. Do you see what I mean? Like, it's like, on one sense, like what I'm saying is very kind of like, this is the new way. And the way that I say it, obviously using like, you know, traditional verbal language, because that's the best way I know how to communicate with other people right now. Like, you know, like even like, you know, trying to like, you know, disseminate these like really like high, like these like crazy like high vibration ideas that I have. It seems as if I'm saying, because like the, you know, the kind of prevailing paradigm of the world, you know, is still all consciousness, where like the act of speaking something implies the kind of pushing away from something else, the abandonment of something else. No, that is not what I'm saying. And I guess I'll try to wrap it here, because this is getting to be a very long entry. Like, it's just, there's so much to say, because like, you know, I'm just trying my best to scratch the surface of this like new paradigm that's so crazy. The deeper you dig into this, like the more words that you need, you know, in a way, like, or rather that like language is insufficient to like truly penetrate to the core of like this new way of thinking, this beyond thinking, this new way of being, this new way of ising. You know, language is kind of insufficient, but like, no, just because I'm saying, or that anyone else will say from this day forward, they could say anything, I could say anything, to the tune of like, this is the new way to live. No, this is not what is being said anymore. This is not my message. This is not what exists in this new paradigm of and consciousness, of you know, of and consciousness, essentially. You know, that's the best articulation I have, I guess, for like all of this. But like, no, just because I or someone else is saying that, like, no, okay, this is how you should live now, and consciousness is the way, does not mean that anything that you have ever done is ever wrong. That's what you got to realize, right? You got to have the flexibility of self, essentially, where like you accept new things, but then you don't resist old things. Just because you need to detach yourself from the kind of thinking that automatically puts that extra line of logic in your mind that is unvoiced, that is subconscious, that says, this has been said, therefore what came before is wrong, is obsolete. No, that is the crux of this new paradigm of moving into unconsciousness, is that everything exists, everything has a right to exist, everything has a right to exist, everything does exist. You know, it's this and all of that stuff that you used to do. You see? And consciousness includes all consciousness. And consciousness does not invalidate all consciousness. And consciousness includes all consciousness. Do you see that? Just because I say that and consciousness is the way forward does not mean that all consciousness is now obsolete and invalid. That is the crux of unconsciousness, right? There's a lot fucking more I can say about this, man. I could talk for days and days probably about this shit, because it's like, you know, there's a few more things I just need to say, I guess. Like, this is the longest fucking video ever, but like, you know, like, essentially this leaves you with, you know, this, what I'm saying, like, it might sound like it is potentially dangerous. I say it's dangerous because, like, not because it is actually dangerous, you know, because what I'm saying might imply that like a serial killer should go back to being a serial killer or something like that, you know, like whatever crazy imagination that you might have, that other people, like other kind of low vibration, like neurotic people might have, you know, fear-based people, because there's a ton of those in the world, right? No, the danger lies in like the very judgment, the very resistance that it stirs, right? In order to move forwards, you must relinquish fear in the form of, oh shit, like he's saying this, therefore it means, or therefore he is saying that child rapists should be child rapists. That it's okay, that it's all part of everything can happen, right? That's what you're fucking saying, right? And consciousness, accept everything, except the fact that there's death and like disease and like fucking, you know, victimization in the world, torture, you know, whatever. No, I'm not actually saying that. You are making the subconscious logical link because of your own fear, essentially, because of your own resistance. I'm not saying that. Am I actually saying that? Or are you making the connection? You know? And that takes a lot of courage to, you know, that takes a lot of courage, right? To be able to like look at what you're thinking and be like, it's actually my own fear, you know? Like, it's weird to me because I can say this kind of thing really easily. You know, because I've faced my fear so much. Like, it doesn't mean that I don't have fear. It just means that, like, I understand the emotion, the energy of fear so well, because I've just had a lot of experience, like, looking into it and facing it, you know. But that, for the average person, is terrifying, you know, to admit that, like, oh yeah, it's just because I'm scared. Like, no one, like, not, the average person would never admit that. It's like fucking terrifying, right? But, like, the thing is, right, you gotta expand, right? So, like, you know, I've given a lot of other ideas, you know, recent, you know, like, if you go back to any of my older videos, like, you know, I talk about expansion. I talk about like this conscious evolution as, you know, I use like the example of indigo crystal rainbow children as an illustration, you know, by being more of ourselves and tapping more into our sensitivity. You know, it entails so many kind of like things, so many concepts. But when you learn to feel for it, it's all the same energy, right? What is complex, conceptually, is usually quite simplistic energetically. You know, like, or at least that's an observation I've made. Like, you know, like when you learn to feel for things like this, when you learn to feel for what I'm like, you know, the kind of thing I'm saying, then it's quite simple. Like it becomes quite simple, you know. Whereas like on the surface, like there's so many concepts I throw at you, you know, there are so many kind of different nuances, but like energetically, it's pretty simple. You know, it's about moving forwards, right? So another way that this might be articulated to you, which is more kind of down to earth and practical, that you might be more familiar with, is decisiveness. Don't people always say that decisiveness is a trait of successful people, right? Elliot Hulse, who is, you know, I've pulled quite a few like kind of like sound bites from, is like this cool guy on YouTube, and like he gave a quote which is, successful people don't make the right decisions. Successful people make the decisions right. That is essentially the same fucking thing that I'm saying. You know, it means roll with the punches of life. You know, it means don't be overly aggressive in the sense of like, no, I cannot accept failure. I cannot accept anything other than my ideal. You know, don't be too hard, but then don't be too soft and like fatalistic and like oh, like everything is illusion. What's the point of anything? You know, like I shouldn't even have desire. Like there's never a point. Why are you trying? You know, why you like, you know, it's all fake. Desire is fake. You know, whatever you desire physically is just like, it's just another thing that comes up in your life. When are you going to realize that that is all fake? It's idiotic, right? You know, right? You know, and that's just, I guess, my ego talking. You know, it's just like frustration towards that kind of thinking that I experienced for like a good year and a bit, right? But like, no. It's decisiveness. It's moving forwards. It's releasing secondary resistance. It's never beating yourself up about anything. It's about having desire and realizing that we're all here on this human journey because we're supposed to be. All of the things that we push away from on the spiritual journey, that's necessary to, like, you know, gain spiritual insight and all that shit. But that doesn't negate the fact that we're here to live. You know, we're all here to live, to hurt, to eat, to fart, to fuck, you know, to pee. You know, like, we're here as human beings. You know, we are here as human beings. We gotta live life, right? So, like, it's, you know, it's ludicrous to say like you like desire is fucking illusion. You know, no, like, we came here to live, right? So, like, live, have your ideals. This is the thing, you know, it might be like, you know, before I was saying, like, you know, people have their ideals, you know, that's wrong. Like, this is me imitating, like, you know, the kind of person, like, their perspective, you know, their subconscious kind of linkage. It's like, oh yeah, so you're saying that, like, you know, all consciousness and, like, fucking having ideals is wrong and striving towards ideals and pushing away from things. No. You do that shit. I do that shit. Right? But after that, life will happen, right? Be decisive, have desire, move in the direction of where you want to go, in the most innocent, earnest way possible. Be fucking earnest, be sincere, be authentic. But then when it comes down to it, whatever will happen will happen. Don't beat yourself up about it. You know, if you make a decision that is like the opposite of how your like usual value system works, don't beat yourself up about it. If you're normally authentic and, like, you know, you're like a spiritual person like me, and you're like, yeah, like, love is the answer, and yet you're inauthentic to, like, your workmates. You put on a front of someone who isn't really you. You self-sacrifice a bit. You know, you don't really tell them your true feelings, but you do it because, like, it just makes the corporate environment, like, more bearable. You know, it like de-stresses. You know, like, people. Like, you know, people aren't, like, you know, expecting, like, people to say dark shit to them. Like, even though it's authentic, right? Like, you know, if you do that occasionally, fine. You are inauthentic. You're gonna go to fucking hell. No, you are inauthentic. That's not authentic, and so, like, it is the complete opposite of your value system. But it doesn't mean you should beat yourself up about it, because it exists in this quantum universe, right? I'm just banging this out, right? I'm hoping that my message is coming across, because this is so important. Also, like, you know, like, I'm like, I guess this is a selfish kind of like personal thing to say now, just to wrap it off, but like, I don't expect myself to be like like a super guru kind of person. You know, like I may be saying this stuff and like I came up with the realizations and everything, but like there's, you know, I have many sides to me. I'm just a normal guy. You know, I may have like completely different perspectives and like goals and like ways of thinking than like most other people, the majority of people on Earth, but like I'm still normal, you know, like I still like play games, you know, watch shows, jerk off, you know, eat, yeah, like I'm just a normal dude, you know, like I have like fucking dark periods, like I'm rude to people, I become petulant at times, I become like, I judge people. I made an entry about judgment is wrong, and I judge people. I judge them, you know. I'm like presumptuous sometimes. Like, you know, I am human. Like, doesn't mean like, you know, again, I'm striving to be the best person that I can be. Don't get me wrong, like that's my goal, and I hope that's your goal too, because it's a beautiful goal to like be the best person that you can be. What a beautiful dream. What a beautiful goal. But at the same time, don't forget that you're human. Don't forget that everything, even if they seem directly opposite, exists, has a right to exist, and is not there to be resisted. Secondary resistance. Right. So I hope that my message was clear enough. I'll probably talk more about this kind of thing because it's really important. Have expectations for yourself, but learn when those expectations are too harsh. You know, too like unattainable. You know, be easy on yourself, but don't become like an escapist. You know, where it's like, you know, what's the, like, there's no point. Because like everyone, you know, I guess this is going towards people who like are more like me, you know, who are like more kind of passive traditionally, like more timid, less ambitious, you know, more kind of chill, more type B kind of a personality. Like, you know, you have ambition. You have ambition. You know, I found my ambition. Doesn't mean I'm always working towards ambition. Like really, like, you know, I fuck up all the time. You know, I waste time. You know, where I could be like just working harder, you know, towards my dreams, but like I waste time. I procrastinate. But that doesn't mean that I don't have ambition, and you have ambition. You see, it's about releasing resistance. You know, it's about having that lightness to you, where like, yes, anything could happen, but also, you know, you can strive. You can strive. You can have ambition. You can move forwards in life. That's fine. But don't resist it. That's the only don't I have. But like, this is the thing. Even if you do resist it, that's okay. You know, the very thing that I would say as, you know, as a crunch for this entry, which is like, whatever you do, don't resist. Like, don't have secondary resistance. But even if you resist, it's okay. Do it. Do the fuck out of it. Resist the fuck out of it. Forget everything I've said and just do the complete opposite. That's the beauty of the kind of consciousness that we're moving into now. Everything becomes okay. So cool. It's been a really fucking long entry, but like, I guess I was a bit talkative today. So I hope you guys are having a good day. I hope that was insightful. If you agree or don't disagree, you know, feel free to leave a comment, you know, it's cool. But yeah, I'll thank you so much for watching for this long, if you're still watching, and I hope you're having an amazing day, and I will catch you in the next entry. Peace out, guys.